Up here is my intro, and I feel like I have to even explain my intro because it's kind of confusing. That's a lot of M's or master's degrees, and I tried to ask them if I could combine them to make a PhD, but they don't let you do that. So I'm just like, fine, I'll just take it. But the only reason it is that way is it took me a really long time to figure out that everything that I've done in my life actually has something in common, okay? So to kind of give you the background, because we all have a story of how we end up where we're at, like many of you, I grew up on a small farm. My dad was a farmer, a Vietnam vet, did odd jobs. We had all of our families kind of nearby on their farms, the uncles, the grandparents, that sort of thing. It was the 80s, the 70s, and so everybody had that small farm they could operate, but it never was really operating that well, and it definitely was not a living. And all I knew is I was forced to be outside all day long. Okay, my parents were like, go outside and don't come back until you hear me call the cows home. Gotcha, good copy. So I really fell in love with nature and observing nature and being in nature. And that is kind of how I evolved in my first career, which was going to school to become a teacher. So I spent 20 years of my life teaching high school science and just retired from that in 2017. And I mostly taught environmental natural sciences, but then there's always this other part around health. Like do you guys ever remember, okay, first of all, if you remember encyclopedias, they did exist, okay, the actual hard ones. I had a set in my room, like a 1960 set. And if you remember, the medical ones would have those inserts that were like transparencies where you could look at body parts and you could like do an overlay and see vessels and then another overlay and see bones and then so on and so forth. And I thought that was the most fascinating thing in the world. So I've always been really also passionate about the human body and medical. So going into science, I got to still play with that, but I still really love nature too. And of course, being a science teacher, I got to do it all. And that was my happy place. So that's where the Masters of Ed came in. Just being a teacher long enough, they're going to just tell you to go back to school, get your Masters of Ed, you bump up the pay scale. But I was lucky enough to get my Masters of Ed in natural and environmental sciences. So literally, I played outside for all my master's courses, which was like the best thing in the world. And then simultaneously, all through high school, in college, I would do side jobs as EMT and ER tech and paramedic. And so I was still dabbling in this medical world, right? So I just have all these pieces, not really realizing that they all had a commonality, or what I like to say now in my world, a root type of cause or a root connection. And what I learned was really about, I just had to change my thinking, like most of us, from this linear, like this fits into this silo, this fits into this silo, this fits into this silo, to they're really all connected. And so once I shifted from a linear thinking or falling into the categories that the world defines for us to a systems thinking, I went back to school for holistic health, and my Master's of Sciences in human nutrition and functional medicine. And guess what functional medicine is equal to? Sustainability or regeneration. It's literally the same verbiage, the same vocabulary, the same concepts, but just around the food side of it or the human body side of it. And then because I didn't go to dietitian school, I became a licensed nutritionist. And this gets confusing for people, and I just want to clear this because this is one of my most frustrating things. People are like, well, you're not really a dietitian. No, I'm not. I don't have a dietitian degree. But the difference is that dietitians can do in-hospital care, like IV therapy and so on and so forth. I cannot do that. But we have the same education, and we both have to do 1,000 hours of clinical training to even get certified, okay? So just don't give those nutritionists hard times out there, or dietitians, because they do require the same type of background. It just kind of depends how you specialize in that world. So that's kind of how I ended up where I am today. So now I get to work in soil health, play outside, okay? I get to have a hobby farm, be with animals. I grow nutrient-dense foods. I'm a master gardener. I'm a master herbalist, so I get to play with herbs and gardens and grow things. And then I'm a nutritionist, so I still get the food aspect of it. And then am still currently and have been for the past 16 years in the Minnesota Army National Guard. I'm a lieutenant colonel. And my job in the military, I started as a medical officer in logistics and operations. And now the military has adopted holistic health and fitness. And so my job is to bring that to our 11,000 soldiers in Minnesota to also get them on the path of wellness and health. So it's all kind of literally come around. So that's where we're at today. That's who I am, okay? So I love that when you ask the question about women and being in fields, I've been the first in some of the military things I've done. Like I was the first female commander of a maintenance unit in Minnesota. And people always ask that question. And what I found in all my careers and what we find in soil health, what we find in nutrition, is that the more diverse you are, the better it is for everybody, okay? Men, women, young, old, whatever, backgrounds, technical expertise, educational expertise. You bring more different people in or bring them to the table, and you're usually gonna find a better system from it, okay? Just like we do with plants and just like we do with food. All right, so today we're going to be able to talk about food, which is fantastic, and how it relates to the soil health and why it is so important. It's kind of common sense, like we know, like we know that food matters. I think we know that. We know that nutrients in food matter, but really connecting the dots and trying to bring those together is the idea here. Okay, so that's our agenda. The background, always start with information, right? We don't know what we don't know. Then I'll talk about all the doom and gloom, so like kind of the problems that exist out there and where we're at right now, which is not a good place when it comes to health, okay? And then, of course, after doom and gloom, you got to give some of the happy stuff, right? So what can we do about it? What can you do to go the right direction? So I want to start the language because something that I get to see when you start to think about systems is how similar the language is between my nutritional job and soil health, okay? So we use, even in medicine or nutrition, when I talk with clients, I use words like conventional medicine and I use words like functional medicine, okay? Conventional is kind of the linear thinking. You go to a specialist for everything under the sun, right? Which I find so interesting and almost just ironic because how can you separate the heart from the brain or the stomach from the liver or the feet from the legs? Like, of course, your whole body's connected. Like, this should be like a duh, type of statement. But we live in a world where we have specialists for each of these things, okay? And if you only know one part of the system, you can't know how it influences other parts of the system, right? And so we call that, just like we do in soil health with conventional agriculture, we use the term naming, blaming, and then taming, okay? So as humans, we like to define something. We like to name it, like give it a name, too much nitrogen or too little of this, like give it a disease name, or we have this parasite, or we have that going on, or you have heart disease, you have diabetes, we name it, okay? Then we blame it, like what's causing it, okay? And, sometimes we know, sometimes we don't, but we need to find a reason, okay? So for example, if you don't have enough nitrogen, okay, what's causing it? Not enough nitrogen. What do? You need to tame it with inputs, okay? Same is true in the nutritional world, right? Or in the health world. You have diabetes, okay? Usually they just say it's your fault. That's why they blame it, okay? Like, it's your fault, or maybe it's genetic, maybe it's something you were born with, okay? And then they tame it with pharmaceuticals, okay? But do we actually fix it? No. We Band-Aid, right? Those are all Band-Aids. And Band-Aids are helpful. They stop the bleeding for a while, right? But they don't actually treat what's causing the bleeding. That's kind of the perspective. When you look at functional medicine or sustainable agricultural or regenerative agriculture, it's a systems thinking. Okay? How is the whole system being affected? Because really, when we name things, we're just naming signs and symptoms. Okay? I'm going to throw this out there. How many of you guys think hypertension or high blood pressure is a disease? Probably most of you, because that's what I tell you. Like, you have hypertension, you have hypertension, you have hypertension. We named it, we blamed it, okay? Hypertension is not a disease, it's a sign and a symptom of something else going on. Your blood pressure only stays high and remains high if something else is not functioning correctly in your body, okay? So with systems thinking, we work backwards and figure out why do you have hypertension, okay? Sometimes it's a sugar metabolism thing, sometimes it's a stress thing, sometimes it's a combination of things, sometimes it's a cardiovascular. There's lots of reasons, okay? But you have to think of the big picture of how is the system affected, all right? And then what we do, and what you guys do in soil health, and what I do as a nutritionist in functional medicine, is I link and I think, okay? So it's almost like you're a CSI, detective, where you take all these clues, okay? Just like you guys take clues in your observations on your soil or your farms or whatever, and you pull those clues together to figure out what might be going on, and then you try something, right? You try something to help out, and it might work, it might not, and then you try something else, and you try something else, okay? But if you approach it from the most root cause possible, all of those next things will be alleviated. All those signs and symptoms that we like to name, blame, and tame. Does this make sense? So the language is very similar. Every time I hear you guys talk, or I'm at soil health things, it's just really interesting how I use a lot of the same language when I'm counseling somebody on a nutritional therapy plan, okay? It's really the same language about systems. Okay, so this is a lot of information, but really I want to talk about how the gut, okay? So if you think of the gut as like our gut is to what soil is to nature. That's what our gut is to us, okay? So your gut is basically the control of how every nutrient, every input will be used for the rest of your body. And again, if you really just take a moment to think about it, your gut is really the only direct pathway to every other system in your body. So it makes sense that your gut is kind of like the gatekeeper, just like the soil is the gatekeeper, okay? And it's amazing of the similarities between the two. Now, there's a lot of people that are way smarter in this room, than I am, especially about soil. Where's the soil chemistry guy? Okay, is that you? Yeah, you. I'm pointing, yeah. Someday, I would love to have an infographic that you can show exactly like how the chemicals in the soil make the minerals, the vitamins, the byproducts, and then how our gut does the same thing. Because it does exist, but nobody's gone there yet to show this in a better way. But here is an example where you can compare and contrast. Okay, so the gut or the stomach is equal to all of the soil. It's kind of like the housing system. Okay, it's like the place it lives in. Okay, and then the duodenum or the small intestine is the rhizosphere, or would be what the rhizosphere is in the soil. Okay, so and it kind of tells you under here what the environment of those places look like. And then your colon or large intestine is like the endosphere in the soil. And all that's saying is that they all have a lot of things in common about their pH, okay, their microbiota or their activity in the soil, and then what they're making or producing. So there's almost like a mirror image of soil and gut in nature. So whoever wants to work with me to create that infographic in a really awesome way, like the smart people, that would be awesome. Because it is important to see that it's just the same thing. We're a system, just like our ecosystem is a system, just like the soil is a system, okay? And the processes exist that have been around forever to make those systems work. Okay, here's another comparison. So I'm trying to just show you how soil and nutrition or health are very correlated in what they do. So this one is just showing you basically conventional agriculture and how that causes gut dysbiosis. Dysbiosis just means that your gut is like off balance. It is confused. It does not have what it needs to function well, which then shows up as a whole bunch of signs and symptoms, which we'll talk about in a little bit. One of the biggest things that messes with your guts are toxins, okay? So anything that's not real, any chemical, any input that we put into our soil that isn't real, okay, is going to be a toxin to your body. And toxins, as we know, are the number one trigger to cause things like cancer, okay? Toxins or inputs also cause your gut to be sanitized in a negative way. Just like you can't grow a lot of variety in the soil if you're not adding food to it or the right nutrients. If you don't give your body the diversity in your gut, It's like your gut is too sterile, and that will also cause a lot of problems, okay? Nutrient poor means that the nutrients are taken out of the plants. So whatever you're growing on that soil, you take the nutrients out, or they don't get those nutrients in the first place. And of course, when you eat those nutrients, your gut doesn't get the nutrients either. And then low diversity is equal to nutrient deficiencies. Okay, our body wants diversity with a whole bunch of different chemicals, different nutrients, different bacteria, different vitamins, different minerals. And of course, when you limit that, what happens is that you become deficient. And I'm going to show you in a little while how deficient we are in a lot of these vitamins and minerals as a population. Versus sustainable. So it's just the opposite, right? Okay, if you increase the diversity in the soil, you increase the nutrient diversity or density in the foods. That goes into your gut biome populates, it makes your gut healthier, you stay healthier, and the cycle continues. Okay, so I pulled this article just for this one excerpt, which I really think is a strong statement on the connection. So just to read this, the soil and human gut contain approximately the same number of active microorganisms, which is approximately 100 trillion microorganisms, most of them bacteria, but as everybody talked about earlier, we want viruses in there, we want fungi, and we want protozoa. Within the microbe diversity within the human gut has decreased dramatically with modern lifestyles and not having access to that soil. So I believe, most people believe, we just have to kind of keep showing it, that a healthy soil should have almost identical bacteria as a healthy gut, if done correctly, okay? So how this actually works, okay, and this is very general, so all you really soil experts out there, I know it's a lot more complicated than this, and go talk to them for more detail. But basically, nutrients in food are extracted by gut microbes, okay? So really, your gut microbes control what is taken out of food and how it's used. They are really the captains of the ship of your human body. Some even say that your gut biome controls everything, including what you crave, how you think, and what diseases you do or don't have, okay? Now, I know that's out there. I know that's kind of maybe seems a little crazy or alien-like or whatever, but if you think about it, bacteria have had the chance to get it right over billions of years, right? Okay? We as humans, as much as we like to think that we have it right, we just aren't as good at understanding how this all works. Okay, so if the nutrient density is compared to the soil nutrient density, your soil and your gut, when it has the right stuff, it makes its own antibiotics, it makes its own immune suppressants, and it also makes its own enzymes to help with disease. Okay, so here's what the diversity looks like. Does this look familiar to soil diversity? Same kind of stuff, right? We want this good proportion of everything, all right? So we have the archaea, the fungi, the microbial eukaryotes, and the viruses. And it seems like, well, we don't want viruses. That's not good, but we do want the right stuff in a certain amount, okay? Because that's what tells our immune system what to protect us against later. So there is a balance of these things when done correctly. This is a really interesting concept. Has anybody ever heard this before, that the human gut is your second brain? Okay, I actually included, there's a great Amazon Prime movie on this, if you're really interested in understanding this more. But your gut has its own nervous system. So that whole term of like, I have a gut feeling, or trust your gut, is more than just a phrase, because your gut will show with signs and symptoms how you feel emotionally. Okay, and vice versa. So your gut does control a lot of your feelings, okay? Serotonin, that's your happy, feel good type of hormone. Most of it is made in your gut. Most of our immune system is in our gut, so the better your gut is, the better your immunity is against disease. And then the gut is so self-regulating that you could actually be like brain dead or cut off that connection between the brain and the gut will still do all of its functions. Okay? So it's really, really, really important. And they say it's the second brain, or some people believe it was the first brain and it evolved later with critical thinking. Not sure about all that, but just know that it has a lot of purpose. So I just listed some of the most common. This is what I see with patients. So when I do clinical counseling, because I do functional medicine, our philosophy is to help patients with chronic illness with food and health or lifestyle factors. And most of you might be saying like, you can't fix that stuff with food, okay? Or you can't reverse this or that. And I was there. I've been there in my life as well. But I have the privilege of seeing people reverse disease when they improve their gut health and improve their lifestyle, okay? There are certain diseases like diabetes, type 2, that can completely be reversed, and I've seen in 2 weeks with the right diet and lifestyles. I mean, completely. They're off their metformin, they're off their insulin, they're good, okay? Autoimmune diseases are almost always a gut issue. Okay, almost always. And it makes sense. If your immune system is in your gut and your immune system is compromised, an autoimmune disorder means that your immune system is overcompensating too much. So everything's a trigger. Everything's kind of setting it off, okay? And so you have to calm the immune system by giving it information where it feels like it has the right information to maintain and stabilize that hyper response. 1 in 3 women today have an autoimmune disorder. It's about 1 in 5 men, okay? That's huge. Autoimmune disorders are everything from lupus, there's so many, arthritis, anything with an itis at the end basically means inflammation, and inflammation all starts in the gut, okay? Acne, people don't realize that almost every skin condition is related to your gut. Almost every single one. Rosacea, dry skin, acne, everything. It's usually a sign. Same with sinus type of things. If you have like rhinitis, where your nose always runs, especially if you notice that your nose runs after you eat, that's a trigger. That's a gut trigger from something that caused you inflammation. All right? Alzheimer's has increased 400% in the last 20 years. And people always say to me, well, that's just genetic. Really? If something's genetic, have our genes changed that much in the last 20 years where we increase? Okay, so memory issues and Alzheimer's are also highly correlated with your gut health, immunity, and inflammation. All your metabolic disorders, so everything that has to do with your heart, your pancreas, your liver, your gallbladder, all those, cancer, thyroid, mental, but really, the first thing I do with every single client, no matter what their disease is I fix their gut. And I have the best job in the world because I always make them better. Are they 100% better? Sometimes. Sometimes they're 10% better, but you always get better. Wouldn't it be great to prescribe a drug or have something that you do that makes somebody better every single time? What an amazing thing. But what that really is saying, it's not about me being like super knowledgeable or really good at my job. It's just understanding that the gut is the root of all your health. Okay? That's what it's about. So if the gut is healthy, the person is healthy. Okay? And sometimes you need a little bit more extra help, but that will get you at least to a better spot. Okay? This just shows the gut-brain axis and all of the mood type of things that go with it. Look on the right at all of those disorders that are related to gut health. Anxiety, autism, visceral pain, or that just means pain, in your stomach on a regular basis, okay? All of the GI disorders. I have clients that go to their gastroenterologist and say, they say, I have stomach pain, and they say, you have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and the patient will ask, what should I do about it? Should I change my diet? And the response is, diet has nothing to do with IBS. I'm like, so any stomach issue has nothing to do with what you eat? It blows my mind, but that's linear thinking, right? Like it doesn't have anything to do with it. And not all gastroenterologists are that way. And I'm not saying that there's not a place for conventional medicine. There absolutely is. But just like with everything else, there's more to it than that. Diversify your medical care and your health so you have a comprehensive approach instead of just one approach, right? That's the idea. So people that I see a lot of teenagers or parents send a lot of teenagers to me that are experiencing anxiety, depression, or ADHD. We change their guts. 2 weeks, they're a completely different person. Okay, especially young people because they rebound so quickly. Your gut has such a toxic environment as far as like being very acidic that it turns over cells so quickly that when you do something to your gut to change it for the better or the worse, the results are fairly quick, which is nice. Okay. I love this study. So this is, I'm going to read it here, but this is a study where Jeff Leach, okay, he looked at the diet. He's an anthropologist. And he looked at the diet of Central Tanzanian hunter-gatherer tribe. So this tribe has existed largely unchanged by modern food for the past 10,000 years, which means that they have, in our opinion, the most primitive gut microbiota that we can access, okay? So we want to see what their guts look like, okay? And then we wanted to see how they eat. And so what he did is he ate the way they ate, okay, for only 1 month, okay? So, and he mapped his microbiome diversity. So on the left was his microbiome, okay, prior to eating the way these hunter-gatherers ate, okay? And then this is after on the right of doing it, of his gut after he did the experiment, okay? And what he found, what this shows is that if you look at the blue-colored Bacteroidetes, okay, those are the ones that are the most protective against health, okay? So that type of bacteria group seems to be in people that are just overall healthy. They don't get sick very often. They don't get infections. They feel pretty good. The people that eat SAD diets, have you guys heard of the SAD diet? SAD is the standard American diet, and it ironically is abbreviated SAD because it is, okay? But the SAD diet on the left is higher in the Firmicutes, which are the bacteria group that are related to obesity, heart disease, and chronic illness. But just look at that shift. It basically just did an opposite shift in those two types. And then, of course, there's other types of things in there that matter. And that's what's amazing about gut type of stuff. Like you could be taking very specific probiotics, prebiotics for a short period of time, and your whole gut biome will shift really, really quickly. We're talking like 2 to 4 weeks. There's fascinating research, and this is I never can get through anything without talking about poop because it's my job. Okay? When you talk about nutrition and food, what's really important is what's coming out on the other end because it tells me how well you're doing, right? Well, there's what's called FMTs, fecal matter transfers, which I know is just a lot to hear, and there's a whole lot of ickiness that you're feeling right now with that term. But what they've learned is they've done a lot of therapies where you take a healthy person with a gut maybe like this, or like those hunter-gatherers. You take their feces, and then they usually freeze dry it like in a pill form or give it as like an IV therapy to somebody. And someone's gut in 2 weeks completely changes and their illnesses go away. And they've also done it with obesity. So they've taken a thin, healthy gut person, put it into an obese, unhealthy gut person, and that person loses weight immediately. Okay, so that's the power of bacteria or power of your microbiota. There's also lots of interesting research on reintroducing parasites into people, worms, okay? So worms, just like they have a place in soil, they have a place in the human gut. They're finding a lot of great results with using worms to help reverse Lyme's disease, which Lyme's disease, as most of you may know, being Minnesota, Midwestern people, where it's really prevalent, that once you have it, it could be debilitating for your whole life. okay, and cause problems for your whole life. So we're learning that if we influence the gut with the right stuff, we can take away a lot of these diseases, just like we do with soil health, right? You give it the right information, and then you're taking better care of your crops and your animals. Okay, so let's talk about nutrient density and vitamins and minerals, okay? So humans, as humans, we can only actually make 11 of the 20 essential amino acids. So amino acids are the little bits and pieces that make up proteins, okay? And that's important because proteins are what makes so many things in our body. Besides, of course, muscle mass, which we all know about, proteins feed all of your neurotransmitters. Therefore, they affect your mental health. So if you're deficient in any amino acids, a lot of times it shows up as mood disorders like anxiety, depression, things like that, okay? And then we also need all of the essential vitamins and 100 minerals from the food that we eat. Now, obviously, if the food that we eat is compromised, okay, that's not nutrient dense or it's nutrient deficient, then we're going to be nutrient deficient too. And that's exactly what's happened, okay? People have reached a point where we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, okay? So like I think Gabe was saying that he's seen a lot of movement lately around nutrient density and realizing the importance. It's because we are in a doom and gloom state, okay? 75% of people have a chronic illness at the age of 40. You are not supposed to be sick when you're 40 years old or 30. Or we're not supposed to have teenagers that have autoimmune diseases, you know, as they go through their teenage years, and we do. It is everywhere. So what we know is that we're starting to see the results of nutrient deficiencies from the past 50 years. So it's hit us literally in the face, okay? And I always say chronic illness is the true pandemic. As it hits everybody, it affects everybody, okay? So don't ever let yourself normalize that. Don't ever let yourself think that, well, you know, I am 40, so it's probably time to be on medication. Or, oh man, you know, I hit my 50s, so I'm supposed to be on 5 or 6 medications. Okay, as humans, we're not supposed to be that way. We're supposed to be generally healthy with a good quality of life if we're being fed well until we don't, which is usually like the last decade of someone's life. They can start to deteriorate, okay? So just don't ever accept that being unhealthy or chronically ill is the norm. We just created it to be that because unfortunately, it feels that way right now. It feels like it's the norm, right? That's the other reason I got into this. I lost both my parents in their 60s, okay? Within 2 years of each other, both from chronic illness. One showed up as Alzheimer's, one was diabetes. My mom was on 14 medications, starting at age 35. My dad was on 16 medications starting at age 40. So even though they made it to their 60s, what was that quality of life for the last 20, 30 years, right? And they're not alone. I bet all of you can think of somebody in your life, or maybe you personally, where this is a true story, okay? That's the norm, or that's what we think the norm needs to be. And I'm telling you, it doesn't have to be that way. If you didn't know, vitamin B12 can only be made from microbes. So the microbe activity matters with that, okay? And then microbes make both primary and secondary metabolites. So metabolite means it helps your metabolism do all the things it needs to do. So your metabolism is basically like your energy and how your body uses everything that it gets from its input, okay? So those microbes are helping with that. And then we know that plants have all these great things in here. All of these have a specific purpose in the nutritional world. You can get supplements with all these things, but we shouldn't have to use supplements if these things were already in our food. And what we're learning is that supplements help, but we cannot mimic what your body is doing with these nutrients. Just like we can add things to the soil, but nature knows best. You know, if you give it what it needs and let it do its processes, it usually does it better than we can. So this just kind of shows you the soil to plants, okay? So basically tells you the elements that are taken up by plants and how and what form it's absorbed. And that change in the form and how it's able to change its structure has everything to do with those microbes, okay? So they're the ones that are creating these metabolites or these different types of chemicals that make our plants have the nutrition that we need. All right, so here's the doom and gloom, okay? I see this all the time. I don't meet anybody, even healthy people, that don't have some sort of nutrient deficiency, okay? Because even if we do a good job of eating real food or looking for nutrient-dense food, it just doesn't exist in the amount to really help us as much as it needs to right now, okay? So most of us are nutrient deficient in something. Here's kind of the big ones, okay? We know about folate in pregnancy, and that's why they have people that are pregnant taking folate or a prenatal vitamin with enough folate. Vitamin A is a fat-soluble vitamin, super essential. Most of us don't get enough of it. Most of us don't get enough of any of our fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, okay? That's because in the 50s, we were injected with the fear of fat. Fat causes heart disease, fat makes you fat causes cholesterol blockage. All that has been debunked over and over and over again. Cholesterol has nothing to do with, bad cholesterol has nothing to do with how much fat you eat, okay? So don't let somebody tell you that. That's not a true statement. In fact, cholesterol is one of the best things your body makes for you. 85% of your cholesterol your body makes because it needs it. It's anti-inflammatory. It builds your hormones, it builds your cell walls, and it protects your brain, okay? So, fat is not the enemy. Sugar is typically the enemy when it comes to over excess. Vitamin D is a huge deficiency, and we know that vitamin D just has everything to do with overall wellness, okay? Everything from your brain to your thyroid to your immune system to healthy pregnancy to fighting off COVID, everything. Here's some more stats for you for minerals, okay? The biggest ones are iron, zinc, and iodine. So low iron causes a bunch of problems, as does excess iron. So males typically have excess iron. Females typically have low iron if they're in their menstruating years and they have like heavy periods. Both can cause a lot of problems and both can be fixed pretty easily, okay? Zinc has everything to do with immunity, so you want to make sure you're getting enough zinc. In fact, if people do have a virus, a cold, not feeling well, zinc is one of those essential things to take during those times. And then iodine is one of the key minerals for thyroid health. So I see so many women that have thyroid issues, and a lot of times it's a mineral deficiency. Okay, so we start there, feed their thyroid what it needs, and then a lot of times they can get to a place where they feel better. Okay, so this is curious. Now, this is already an alarming slide, just because, like, look at the percentages. But here's the other side to this. RDA means the recommended daily amount, okay? Well, if you don't know this, RDA is based off of the normal or average human. Now, I just told you that 75% of humans have a chronic illness or are sick. So do you want to be compared to the average American if most of us are sick? No. But that's what happens. When you go in and get lab tests, you're not compared to optimal. You're compared to the average population. And the parameters that doctors use are just really trying to see if you're going to die tomorrow or in a few months, or are you really sick or not really sick? But there's a whole big gap between being really sick and being optimal, okay? So all that means is this is much higher than what's on the screen, right? Okay? Because this is the RDA, not the optimal ranges. So when I see clients, I actually have them go through their lab values with me and say, okay, like vitamin D, for example, the doctor will say you're fine if it's 32 to 80, okay? We know that if you're under 60, you're not functioning optimally, okay? So people are walking around with a vitamin D of 32, 33 and like, I'm good. Doctor says I'm good. I got the okay, all right? But they're not at full functional health. Magnesium is another one I see with clients. Almost all of us can use more magnesium. And the reason is because magnesium gets used up all the time. So if you do have it, your body uses it in over 200 enzymatic reactions, which means that it uses it to make things, change things, use things. So since your body's just doing its job of functioning, it's always using up the magnesium. And we just don't have enough magnesium in our foods to replenish it. Okay, so if we feed the soil, I'm not going to go into this. Okay, if you feed the soil, your food becomes nutrient dense. And this is something that we all know. This is something that like Gabe and people are working towards to understanding how can we get to a place of measuring nutrient density. Okay, and can we live in a world where your value of your crop is based on nutrient density and not the quantity you have? I believe that's the goal, okay? And people like Peter, right? You're, working with instruments that maybe someday we all can have a handheld instrument that we can scan food and it will tell us its nutrient density. These things are happening and they're being created. Okay, so that's what's being worked towards, but until then, the very least we can do is as we improve our soil, we know that we're improving the nutrient density in our food, okay? And then we'll just have to prove it at some point, and that's of course always the goal. So what I can talk to you about, and where my wheelhouse is how can you feed your gut, okay? So I don't use words like you shouldn't, you can't, eliminate, because if you're like me, and maybe I'm just stuck in my defiant stage of a teenager, when I hear the words can't, stop, eliminate, cut out, I'm just like, right, I'm gonna do whatever I want, or you want it more, right? So instead of thinking that way, think about what are things you can do, when you can do it, okay? It doesn't have to be 100% of the time, it's just as often as possible, how can you feed your gut? Because every single decision counts. If you can make one decision once a month to feed your gut, that's one more decision than you made before, okay? If you can make 5 a day, that's great, okay? So the more you feed your gut, the healthier you'll be and the better you'll feel, and that's all I want for people, okay? So I told you about my family growing up in an unhealthy family. So I have 3 siblings. I'm the second oldest. I'm 48. My brother's 50, and then I have a 46-year-old sister, and then a 40-year-old brother. They're all on medications already for blood pressure and heart disease, okay? And not even all of them are overweight or obese, but every single person in my family is obese, and every single person has a chronic illness by the time they're 40 years old. All my aunts, all my uncles, all my cousins, so on and so forth. That's just the world that I live in. And I myself, when I was 26 years old, I hit my maximum weight of 450 pounds, okay? And so I've been there. I know what the struggle is with obesity, with food, with a relationship with food, but I also know how good it feels to feel good. And that's honestly all I want people to know is like, you don't know you're miserable until you're not miserable anymore, right? We don't know what we don't know. And so just for the sake of being like, do I feel good or what is it like to feel good? That in my mind is just a case to try it, and just see if you feel different, okay? And the bonus is no matter what, you're helping yourself, okay? So real food, that is all I teach, okay? I would not thought as a 17-year-old girl thinking about what I was going to do for college that my job would be to teach people how to eat real food. But we live in a world where we can't find real food very well, okay? It's very hard to do. I tell people, you might think going to the grocery store is like this beautiful array of like food and food options. I call it a battlefield, okay? Because it is. Because really, the grocery store is a whole bunch of options about corn products and soybean products with a few things sprinkled in there, okay? And I'm not saying that soybean and corn is all bad, but is that a diverse diet? Okay? No, okay? We don't need for 80% of our diet to come from 1 or 2 foods or 1 or 2 nutrients. We need to diversify our diet that will make us healthier, okay? So eat real food, and I explain that is if it has a face or it comes from a stem, you're good, okay? That's real food. It's that simple, but complicated, right? Okay, it's not that easy. Eat in balance. So it's not only what we eat, but it's what it's combined with. So your bacteria recognize different options and things in balance. I always think of vegetables as being married to fats because they do so well together. So when you eat that broccoli, that cauliflower, those greens, add all that flavor to it. And man, they taste so much better. Like, why not? Put butter on them. That's fantastic. Put olive oil on them. Put cheese on them. Put, avocado. Put whatever fat you want on there, nuts, seeds. Okay? And when you combine that fat with that vegetable, they help each other out be digested the way they're supposed to be digested. Okay? The vegetables have all that fiber, and they're going to give you the vitamins and minerals. The fat slows down that absorption of fiber, right? So you're able to actually have time to digest it, and you actually have this great cycle of digestion, absorption, elimination. Okay? That's the goal. And I know I got to go. I know I shouldn't talk about poop again, but just reminded me, make sure you're pooping once a day at least. Okay? It's not normal to not poop once a day, even if your doctor tells you that, okay? We're supposed to be eliminating at least once a day. And the reason why is when you don't poop, all those toxins build up, and those toxins cause a lot of problems like leaky gut, as well as just feeling really crappy. Get it? Crappy, huh? Okay. So I check to make sure you're paying attention. And then the proteins are there as essential things, right? So we need protein. And by far, we know that animal protein is the only source of protein that has all your amino acids. Eat your meat. I'll work with vegans, but I will warn them that they will probably be nutrient deficient if they don't start eating meat. Okay, you can do vegan for a while, and it probably will make you feel better initially because meat is hard to digest, so it kind of puts a little stress on our digestion, okay? But if you go too long without getting those amino acids from meat, and meat also has B12 in it, then we usually become deficient after a while, okay? But does the quality of the meat matter? Absolutely, okay? Eat the meat from the animals, eating the plants from a good soil, and you're good, okay? So quality matters. When you think about animal products, the quality matters. That's why dairy and meat got a bad name in the nutritional world. It wasn't because meat and dairy are bad things. It's because when you add antibiotics to your meat and dairy and hormones to your meat and dairy, okay, or they're eating things that are nutrient dense, that's going to affect the quality of the protein that you eat, okay? So if you have the opportunity, always choose good quality meat. Eat fermented foods. So when I say the word fermented, how many of you guys are like, do kind of like the nose thing, like that sounds disgusting? Anybody? Does that sound disgusting? Okay. It's funny because I can tell the health of somebody's gut by asking them a few questions. If I say fermented and they're like, gross, okay, or no way, then I know they don't have the right gut bacteria yet, okay? Because you want the bacteria that eat fermented foods. Those are the best ones. Okay? When I tell them that we're going to try to give up sugar for a while and they get pissed off and almost combative with me, I also know they have the wrong bacteria. And it's not because they're bad people. It's not because they're mean people. It's because your bacteria tell you what to crave. And as soon as you think about not feeding those bacteria that love sugar, they retaliate. And that's a true statement. They get pissed off, and then you get pissed off, and then you yell at me. Okay? So if you ask people those two questions and you see their responses, you can get a general assessment of their gut diversity, okay? Here's the beautiful thing about fermented foods. There's so many, okay? And they are both a prebiotic and probiotic. So that's nature's medicine for bacteria, okay? You can take probiotics. They're not as good as eating fermented foods. And fermented could be anything from pickled, the sauerkraut, the kimchi, the kefir, but even hard cheeses, aged cheeses are fermented, okay? Yogurt, of course, is fermented. Even your beer and alcohol, the only issue with that is watch the sugars, because as soon as there's sugar in fermented foods, which bacteria are you feeding, right? Okay, so I always say start with fermented vegetables or dairy where it doesn't have sugar in it, like full-fat dairy. Then work your way up to the fermented sugars, okay? So we're feeding the right bacteria. But even if you just take a tablespoon or add a tablespoon of sauerkraut to your steak, or to your salad or whatever, that is enough fermented food. Okay, it doesn't have to be a lot, just start somewhere. And you'll find the more you eat it, the more you'll like it, because those bacteria are populating and saying, give me more of that, okay? Bitters also go with this. So bitters are gonna be things like your bitter greens. They're gonna be things like lemon, lime, that type of stuff, vinegars. Bitters are also good for your gut. Gabe mentioned this, and I love that he said this. I really try hard on my farm to keep the things in nature that are growing there as weeds, because they're telling me that they're there for a reason. So I use, and of course you gotta remember that I'm an herbalist, right? So I use and look for things like dandelions and stinging nettle and creeping Charlie or ground ivy. Those spring plants are intentionally meant to help with detoxification and gut health. They're the cleansers. So they come out for a reason in the springtime. Do you guys know what horsetail is? It grows like kind of in marshy areas. It's like sometimes called like the Lincoln log plant. That is the only food or plant that we have and know of that has all of our minerals that we need in it. Okay, and it makes sense. If you kind of like touch it, it's very minerally, like silica-y type of thing. So it's one of the best things you can have for bone health, for things like osteoporosis or osteopenia, okay? Those plants have survived thousands of years for a reason. So we think of them as weeds, but think of the effort that they've made to stay around for this long, okay? So there's usually a purpose for those types of things when you see them come out. Eat them up, eat them up. Same with plantain. Horsetail? Yep, horsetail. Yep, another good one for bone health is oak. Okay, so oak bark, oak leaves, those type of things also help with bone health. Yeah, if you want more information on plants that help with certain diseases, I'm happy to talk. That could be a whole class in its own, but they all do have purposes. For females going through hormonal changes, menopause, postmenopause, blue vervain is one of the best things you can incorporate into your meals or as a tincture. So there's usually a purpose for things that are out there, not only for when not only that they do show up, but when matters, okay? To the human body, spring means detoxification, okay? So the things that show up in the spring will help you with those types of processes in your body, okay? In the summer, it's really about vitamins and minerals. What is it in the fall? If you're using this logic, what do we eat in the fall? What is in season in the fall? Starchy, right? Because we have to store for winter, right? So as humans, we've mostly been in a food-deprived type of time frame, and so our bodies have learned to store starches for the winter time, okay? And so that's why we have the apples and the berries and the starchy root vegetables. That is all intentional. Okay, except for we're not starving anymore. And there's a great book called Nature Wants Us to Be Fat. And what that says is that it's true. Nature only knows how to store energy. Our bodies don't know how to get rid of excess energy because there's no survival in that, right? So your body will always default to storing fat because it needs to survive, okay? You have to work really hard for it not to do that. So these are the other things that you can do for your gut, and these are more holistic lifestyle things, okay? I cannot tell you, and I could do a whole class on the importance of sunshine and your circadian rhythm, okay? The more you're outside, the healthier you'll be. That's it, okay? It's really, really that simple. And there's a lot of reasons for it around hormones and light and how your cells respond to light, but just know that. Reduce toxins as much as possible. That will keep you healthier longer. Reduce stress. Your gut and stress are very reactive, okay? So if you're stressed, it will affect your gut and how you feel. Learn sleep. If I could pick anything for people to work on besides their gut, it would be getting enough sleep. Because sleep is the only time your body does repair, like 100% of the time. Okay, so if you're not sleeping, you're not repairing. If you're not repairing, you're increasing inflammation, and every single disease stems from inflammation. Okay, So I know that we like to do things. I know that we like to stay up late. I know sometimes it's hard to sleep, but it is something that you can change that will greatly affect your health. And then intermittent fasting. I don't like this word fasting because right away people think you're going to starve me, okay? And it's not about that. It's really about just eating the way nature intended, okay? Nature didn't intend us to eat 24 hours a day or 17 hours a day or 18 hours a day. Nature intended us to eat basically, 12 hours, maybe like dawn to dusk-ish, okay? And then it meant us to rest for 12 hours. Because every time you eat, that is an inflammation or trigger to your gut, which means your gut has to do a lot of work to use that food. We need to eat, we should eat, but if you think of it as like work for your gut, you don't want to be demanding that work all the time, right? So give your body just an equal chance to rest, 12 hours not eating, 12 hours eating. That's intermittent fasting, okay? It's just the way we're supposed to eat, but we've just gotten so far away from it that it seems like we're fasting or starving ourselves. So that's just a good place to start. That's another place you can start. So what can you do, and why does this matter to you as a farmer, okay? So, of course, if you're a person that's here today, most of you are here because you care. You care about your soil, you care about health, you care about the environment, which means that you're also typically the people that just care about your health, okay? So that's a place to start, is just take care of yourselves, for your benefit, for your kids' benefit, for your grandkids' benefit, for your spouse. Live the quality of life that you deserve, And we do that by putting the right information into our bodies. Food is information, okay? I do not talk about calories ever, okay? Because it's not that simple. It's not an in and out type of thing. Food is a whole bunch of information. It's a whole lot more complex than that. And I can prove that to you. I can give you 2 Oreo cookies, and I can give you 2 pieces of avocado. They're the same amount of calories. Are they going to do the same thing in your body? No, okay? The avocado is going to do a lot more better things than the Oreos would, okay? Not saying that you should never eat Oreos. I'm not saying that, but start to think about food as information instead of as this net calculator of calories in, calories out. That's logical, but I always say our bodies are biological, okay? They're not logical. Just like soil is biological, okay? It's more than a chemistry test of your soil that matters. You have to get the biological part down too. The same is true for your body, okay? Do your soil health practices. Make nature your pharmacy. Nature already has everything we need to heal every disease. We just don't know it all yet, okay? Or we've forgotten what it is. So nature is your pharmacy. Turn there first and see what you can do. I want you to be able to market nutrition, okay? Like Gabe was saying, we might not be able to be there yet where we can actually, pay you for nutritional density in your food, but it doesn't mean you can't talk about it, okay? So if you're doing a test and you know that your food has more magnesium grown with good soil health practices than your conventional neighbor, then say that, because that's what's driving food these days. People are sick and tired of being sick and tired. So they care about food and health, okay? They are out there, and they will find you if you have a product that is nutrient dense. And I am happy to give you a quote, or, nutritionist says that, these oats are rich in magnesium, selenium, and iron, okay? That is something that you should all be able to do, is to market your products based on their nutritional density. And then diversify, we talked a lot about like what you guys use for cover crops and what you plant, and those all sound fantastic, but can you plant things like, some of these herbs, in there too? Can you plant things like chamomile? Or can you plant things like blue vervain? Some of these prairie plants or medicines that have been around for thousands of years, can they be a part of this diversity mix that you put into your soil? And see what happens with that. And then most importantly, I'm tired of farmers, military, all these people that are under high stress, and it's everybody. Mental health matters, right? And mental well-being, and so does physical. But what we don't realize maybe is that they are completely correlated. When you are physically well, you're automatically mentally healthier. Maybe you're not 100% and you might need some additional help, which is fine and great. But if you improve your physical well-being, you will absolutely improve your mental, okay? And vice versa. And we need to be mentally healthy. We deserve to be that way, okay? So for ourselves and for our families. Okay, so there's my info. I know this is hard to listen to at the end of the day, guys, sorry. I just put in there like this is where I work. It's Nutritional Weight and Wellness, but what I like about their website, and this is a link, and I don't know if we can share this with people if they want this PowerPoint, via PDF, but if you go in there, they have so many free resources with articles, blog posts, and recipes around real food and balance, okay? So if you want just ideas, you need to think about something that you want to make, you can go there. I'm happy to receive any emails from you. That's both my work email and my personal email. I put it up there for a purpose. So if you have questions, you need anything, please reach out. And then lastly, we do have a podcast. And if you're a podcast person, it's called Dishing Up Nutrition. And what's nice about this is all these have been recorded for the past 18 years. So if you go into the website and put in the search button, any topic, anxiety, depression, diabetes, acne, whatever the topic is, it will show you every podcast we have on that topic. So you can be choosy about which ones you want to listen to based on your concerns or interests. All right, it's yours, Mark.